So my topic was, what are nanobots? Before I got into what nanobots actually were, I decided to talk about what nanotechnology and nanoscience was. And I talked about how this guy called Richard Feynman, who was a scientist back in 1959, was it? Yes, 1959. And he was basically the person who introduced the idea of nanotechnology and nanoscience. And it's about some fun facts of how people back like centuries ago would still be using nanotechnology. They just wouldn't know what it was. Like those crystal colored walls you see in churches, they were actually made out of nanoscience, but no one just knew the proper term to use for it. Then I talked about the manufacturing of nanoscales, which is called nanomanufacturing. And there's two approaches to this, which is called top-down and bottom-up method. Top-down method is like when they get large, big objects and then they shrink it down to the nanoscale. And with this way, it's very time-consuming, and it could also lead to like a lot of excess products. And the bottom-up method is actually building up from the nanoscale. But this also takes up a lot of time. That's why scientists today are trying to find another way in which they can build something that will do the top-down, bottom-up method for them. And then I got into what a nanobot actually was. Nanobots in theory are supposed to be like extremely small nanoscale pieces of technology that will be mainly used to protect the body from pathogens and stuff. Because nanobots will be mainly made out of carbon, it's going to essentially cost nothing because carbon is the most abundant element. For now, nanobots are just a scientist's dream, because all of these things are actually just based on hypotheses. We don't know if we can actually build something like this. The reason why we can't actually build nanobots today is because of its power supply. They can't use normal batteries or solar cells, which means then they would have to use nuclear power, which would be actually painting a thin layer of the radioactive substance over the nanobot and then transmitting it into the body. But to think of it technically, how unhealthy that would be for the body, because nanobots will have to actually dissolve inside of the body. The reason why they have to dissolve is because nanobots are so small, swarms of them will be needed to actually make a difference and complete the task. And so if there is lots and lots of nanobots filling into one area, then wouldn't it be ironic if the thing that was supposed to prevent you from like blocked arteries was the one that blocked it instead? So that's why nanobots dissolve down, and that's why it would not be good to have something nuclear inside of your body to dissolve down, because it can lead to things like instant death. And there's another way for it that scientists considered, which was silicon, because silicon was smooth and it conducted electricity, so it was perfect. But the problem with silicon was that it didn't dissolve, and we already discussed why dissolving was so important. Ray Kurzweil, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's an engineer and a futurist, and he has a prediction, like accurate prediction rate of 86%. He's been predicting things since the 1990s, and he's predicted over 147 predictions, and over 115 of them came out correct, and 12 of them were off by just a couple of years. So why am I talking about this guy? It's because this engineer believes that by the 2030s, nanobots will have evolved so much that we will actually be able to place them like chips inside of our brain, going through the nervous system and connecting to the neocortex, which will like essentially connect our brain to a cloud. And like this, it'll be like smartphones. We can like close our eyes and play games, and this will cause us to live a higher order existence. And 2030 is only 12 years away. How exciting is that? It's a really interesting theory called the grey goo theory. And I know it sounds kind of weird when you call it grey goo, but it's really interesting. So essentially what the grey goo is, it's this theory that nanotechnology will advance so much so that nanobots will eventually take over. So once these nanotechnologies get really smart, they can start building their own type of nanobots, like their sisters or whatever, and essentially they'll just ruin everything in their path and consume it, and Earth will just be a wasteland. Something like this today is impossible, as we haven't even developed any nanobots yet, but technology is limitless.